Good morning, I'm Sarah Sapsanama. Let's begin with the headlines of the hour. Candidate nomination for nearing by-election scheduled for today. Election Code of Conduct to come into effect from midnight tonight. Complaints, if any, against the candidates to be filed tomorrow. Finance Minister Bishnu Podul expresses dissatisfaction with the performance of Inland Revenue Department, says the targeted revenue collection might not be achieved at current pace. Israeli forces kill at least 51 Palestinians in one day. Israeli settlers storm and set fire to Palestinian homes in occupied West Bank. IDF continues to pound Lebanon. And Yannick Sinner outclasses Norway's Kasper Ruud to set up an ATP Finals title decider against Taylor Fritz. Sinner unstoppable in the semis, dispatching Ruud 6-1, 6-2. Nominations of candidates for the local level by-elections are being registered today. The Election Commission has set up a schedule for the registration and election process for the nearing by-election. Nominations is being registered from 10 a.m. today to 5 p.m. at designated election offices. A final list of candidates will be published on 19th of November from 5 p.m. to 6. Candidates can withdraw their nominations on 20th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and the final list is to be released between 1 to 3 p.m. on the same day. Election symbols will be issued from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Voting will take place on December 1st from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. The elections are for 44 vacant positions at local levels. The ruling party CPN-UML has criticized former Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal's remarks on Premier KP Sharma Oli's in an interview with the Indian media. Dahal had accused Oli of using China card and called his upcoming 5-day China visit immature. In response, UML issued a press release yesterday terming Dahal's allegations baseless, irresponsible and harmful to Nepal's sovereignty and foreign policy. UML Foreign Affairs Chief Raghuveer Mahasit stated that such comments violate diplomatic norms and undermine Nepal's independence. UML emphasized Nepal's balanced ties with India and China and urged Dahal to retract his statements, apologize and avoid jeopardizing Nepal's international image for political gains. Prime Minister Oli is scheduled to visit China first week of December. Finance Minister Bishnu Podul has expressed dissatisfaction with the performance of Inland Revenue Department and its subordinate offices. He has mentioned that the performance evaluation has declined in comparison to last year and said that the targeted revenue collection cannot be achieved through normal work pace in unusual circumstances. Speaking to the event organized in Kathmandu on the occasion of National Tax Day, Podul urged the employees to work honestly. He said that the level of tax inspection is not as per satisfaction. He has further insisted on the modernization of tax administration, introduction to the cost reduction practices, development of technology-friendly manpower, and expansion of the scope of taxes. Koshi province is to organize a 3-day investment summit in Biratnagar in January next year. The local government has sped up the preparation of the summit. Experts have suggested to create an investment-friendly environment along with the preparations for the summit. The provincial government has expedited the necessary provisions by forming Chief Organizing Committee, Steering Committee, Policies and Legal Reform Committee, Advisory Committee and the Secretariat.
आन्तरिक विषयमा विभिन्न छलफल चलिरहेका छन् त्यसको तयारीको कामहरु पनि अब यो लगानी बोर्डले सोकेसको योजनाहरु आफ्नो तर्फबाट तयारी गर्ने काम यहाँको चाहिँ यो आयोजक समितिको मुख्य समितिले त्यसको मुख्य आयोजना गर्ने काम र अन्य विभिन्न विभागहरु यहाँ छुट्याइएको छ त्यसको सचिवालय चाहिँ अस्तिसम्म अलिकति सक्रिय हुन सकेका थिएन अहिले फेरि सक्रिय गर्ने र कर्मचारी पुरा गर्ने काम हामीले सम्पन्न गरेका छौं.
In the conference, projects started by the Provincial Investment Committee, projects worth more than 100 million rupees sent by the local level committee and those selected and sent by all 14 district coordination committee and those selected by the provincial ministries will be presented in the order of priority. The government is preparing to present 60 to 100 projects related to tourism, agriculture, water resources, industry, mining minerals and information technology at the investment summit.
60 देखि 100 वटा परियोजना हुन सक्छन् जसमा चाहिँ पर्यटन, उद्योग, खानी खनिज, कृषि, यो जल संसाधन, आईटी क्षेत्रका र सेवा र यातायात सम्बन्धी क्षेत्रका चाहिँ सबै किसिमका परियोजनाहरू हामीले चाहिँ समावेश गर्ने अहिले एक किसिमको निर्णय भएको छ।
Chairperson of Maui Center, Pushpa Kamal Dahal, and leader of the opposition party, who has been saying that he is not interested in breaking the ruling alliance, has claimed that the government will be formed under the leadership of Maui Center after the government led by KP Sharma Oli. While addressing a program yesterday, Dahal claimed that if the Oli-led government collapses, he will form a government under the leadership of his own party. He insisted that the opposition party is a government in waiting. With the collapse of the Nepali Congress and Maui Center coalition government, Dahal has been strongly criticizing the Oli-led incumbent government. It is time now for our segment Public Pulse, where you text us with your opinion. The question is, what's your take on Finance Minister Bishnu Paudil's statement that the government might not attain its targeted revenue with the current approach? Your options are A. Stop revenue leakage, B. Pile pressure on public officials, and C. Do some self-reflection. The voting is on. Type NEWS, select your option A, B or C and send it to 34001 to share your opinion with us. Time now for international update. Israel's military continues to pound Lebanon's capital Beirut and says it carried out 50 attacks on the city's southern suburbs in the past week alone. In Gaza, Israeli forces killed at least 51 Palestinians in one day, while in the occupied West Bank, masked Israeli settlers stormed the village of Beit Furik and set fire to Palestinian homes and vehicles. Lebanon's Hezbollah continued to trade fire with Israel's military, launching dozens of missiles and drones at Israeli military bases and hitting a synagogue in the city of Haifa. Israel's genocide in Gaza has killed at least 43,799 Palestinians and wounded 103,601 since 7th of October last year. An estimated 1,139 people were killed in Israel during the Hamas-led attacks that day, and more than 200 were taken hostage. In Lebanon, at least 3,452 people have been killed and 14,599 wounded in Israeli attacks since the war on Gaza began. The Lebanese government has published a report that demonstrates the scale and intensity of Israel's attacks on the country. The report by Minister of Environment Nasser Yassin says there have been 145 Israeli attacks across the country in the past 24 hours. Most of them were in Nabatieh and South Lebanon, with 55 raids and 73 raids. The report says there have been a total of 13,222 attacks since the beginning of the aggression. Now, 8 people have been killed and 17 others injured in a knife attack at a vocational school in Wuxi City in eastern China. The suspect, a former student, has been arrested. The attack occurred at Wuxi Vocational Institute of Arts and Technology in Yixing County at about 6:30 p.m. local time. Police said the suspect was a 21-year-old former student at the school who was meant to graduate this year but had failed his exams. This is the second deadly attack within a week after a man drove his car into people at a sports facility in the southern city of Zhuhai, leaving 35 people dead and 43 others injured. There has been a spate of other attacks in recent months. In October, in Shanghai, a man killed 3 people and wounded 15 others in a knife attack at a supermarket. And the month before, a Japanese schoolboy was fatally stabbed in the southern city of Shenzhen, which borders Hong Kong. Defense ministers of Australia, Japan and the US met military troops in the Australian city of Darwin ahead of their trilateral meeting to discuss continued military cooperation. Australia's Defense Minister Richard Marles, Japan's Defense Minister Gen Nakatani and US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin arrived at HMAS Coonawarra, a Royal Australian Navy base, where they met troops and took turns to speak to personnel. Shortly after, the ministers and their delegates sat for their trilateral meeting, which was the 14th of its kind between the 3 nations, according to a statement from Marles's office. Bilateral meetings would also be held with each country. At the last trilateral held in Singapore in June, the nations expressed serious concern about security in the East China Sea and said they opposed any destabilizing and coercive unilateral actions there. Indigenous organizations sank giant cutouts of the top G20 leaders' faces in Botafogo Bay in Rio de Janeiro to protest against what they say is global inaction on measure to stop climate change. Holding banners reading "We are the answer," the protesters' representatives urged the leaders of the world's biggest economies to listen to them in order to find a way to fight the warming of the planet and cut carbon dioxide emissions. The demonstrators have also been demanding the large demarcation of indigenous land in Brazil. The G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro on Monday and Tuesday next week comes as the United Nations COP29 climate talks enter their second week, with negotiators debating a new goal for how much money richer nations will cough up to confront climate change. UN officials and other delegates in Baku have expressed hopes that a strong message from the G20 leaders could help provide political momentum for a COP29 deal on climate finance. However, 4 diplomats involved in the talks in Rio said they were at a familiar impasse. Developed nations want some of the wealthier developing countries to contribute financing to tackle global warming, but the developing world says it is up to the world's wealthiest nations to foot the bill. Reaching a global accord may only get tougher with the return to power of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, who is preparing to again pull the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. Several protests are planned ahead of the G20 meeting in Brazil, where troops have been deployed together with armored vehicles and naval ships to reinforce security. Hundreds of activists at COP29 held a protest calling for rich nations to raise the amount of money they are allocating to fight climate change. The protesters first gathered inside one of the plenary rooms at the COP29 venue in Baku, Azerbaijan, where they made speeches and chanted slogans. They later formed a chain in the space outside the venue where they hummed and snapped their fingers in protest. They said developed nations were historically responsible for greenhouse gas emissions and needed to support poor countries that are more impacted by the consequences of climate change.
So here we say rich countries would have to pay up, pay up for their climate debt. They owe us big time. They find money for wars. They find money for supporting the fossil fuel industry, but they say that they don't have money for climate action. We're calling out that bull in this COP.
Protesters also complained about not being allowed to chant or make speeches in the area outside the plenary and instead having to resort to humming. While under United Nations guidelines, protests are not allowed on its premises in general, an exception is made for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which allows for protests at COP summits in pre-agreed areas with civil society members. Some of those areas allow chanting, while others do not, if it is a closed negotiation room where loud noise would disrupt the talks. That is all for the moment. Our next English bulletin will be at 6 this evening. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.